on the social and ecological transition. We will discuss how networks of cultural sites and networks of cities can work together. So it can be in the living arts, in festivals, etc. For example, how do these networks work together towards the ecological and social transition? We are delighted to have Aurélie Clémente-RUIZ, Director of the Musée de l'Homme, Rudy Guilhem-Ducléon, who is in charge of development at the Collectif des Festivals, Olivier FLAMENT, Director of the Association for Prevention of La Villette, and Olivier SERGENT, Director of the Sustainable Culture Mission of the city of Lille. The moderator will be HUGOUNENQ, who I'm sure you already know, is an independent journalist specialized in the economics of cultural institutions. She's also a teacher. Can everyone hear me? All right, Sarah, you got the floor. Thank you, Annabelle. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Annabelle. And good afternoon, everyone. We will indeed be talking about the energy transition and sustainable development. Is the sound all right? Okay, good. So there are new expectations today, and we'll look at how we are changing the way that we work and collaborating in new manners, both at the scale of the institution, by changing the methodology of work, breaking down silos between departments, and we'll also be looking at how this expectation that also comes from the Ministry of Culture, how this reshapes all of our practices. Which means, of course, that we have to ask the environmental question, but not just. It also means that we have to think together beyond simply our sector or our institution, whichever our sector or subsector might be. As Annabelle explained, we have four panelists from four different institutions, and we're starting with Rudy. You are part of the Collectif des Festivals, which brings together 32 different festivals. Can you tell us more about this grouping of festivals and tell us about the origin story of this group and how you decided to work together on sustainable development? I know that you also work with national networks that are more specifically focused on the cultural sector. Yes, that is true. So it is called Le Collectif des Festivals. It is based in Rennes, and it actually brings together 33 festivals who want to make headway on solidarity development and towards a greener approach. So we're looking at social topics as well, such as gender equality or rate accessibility and affordability, etc. In 2005, the grouping was created unofficially, and then it became an official association in 2009. And those festivals decided that they would work together, but also think together and pool their resources. Because we realized that all those festivals had the same problems and that it would be best to find an answer collectively. Over time, new members came as well. And so since 2009, we've had a charter, a commitment charter on the green transition and on solidarity transition. So signing this charter is how you come into the group, and it means that you will then be part of a pool and a think tank, so to speak. It also means that you will be supported by our grouping, mostly by myself, actually. That's part of my job. And that means that we will make you benefit from our expertise on those issues. I will maybe explain later what we do exactly, but the basic idea is that we pool both the knowledge and the means that we have. Thank you, Rudy. Aurélie, you are the director of the Musée de l'Homme, and you are therefore part of the bigger network of the Natural History Museums. In 2020, your institutions launched la Colline des Arts, so the Théâtre de Chaillot, for example, the Kappa, the Guilhem Museum, the Palais de Tokyo Museum, etc., started working together on swapping best practices. There's actually two levels to what we do. The Musée de l'Homme is one of the sites of the National Natural History Museum network, so that we are part of an ecosystem of different museums. We have different sites, of course, those in Paris, in the Jardin des Plantes, in the 5th arrondissement, or at the zoo as well, but also in Concarneau, for example, outside of Paris. And all those sites have their own problems. But the first level is within the museum. We have one person who is in charge of sustainable development and of finding solutions establishment-wide. But as you can imagine, one person, one full-time job is not enough to solve all of these issues. So that in each team, in each department, everyone is trying to also take those issues into account in their daily job. So you said that I'm the director of the Musée de l'Homme, and that's true, but within the museum establishments, I'm also in charge of coordinating the museum pool. Because within the museum, we have different museums. We have the Musée de l'Homme, but also the paleontology gallery, the minerals gallery, etc. And I am in charge of coordinating these different museum galleries, so as to try and gain efficiency, to be more efficient on environmental issues, for one thing, but not just, even though that's one of our main issues. And then in 2020, we created La Colline des Arts, which you just mentioned. That's very different. It's part of the Colline de Chaillot establishments that decided to create a network. So there are 11 institutions in Chaillot. Those are both institutions that are within Chaillot, the Museum of the Marine, the National Museum, the Musée de l'Homme, and other institutions that are outside of Chaillot proper, such as the Palais de Tokyo, Musée Guilhem, the Modern Art Museum, the Musée Yves Saint Laurent, etc., all the way to the Champs-Élysées Theatre. So a lot of different institutions that have different missions and different approaches, and we try to identify joint actions and joint programming, but we also try to see how we can act collectively to be better at what we do. Because today there is this expectation, there is this will to be greener and to find joint solutions. So within the Colline des Arts network, we have 4 institutions that are within Chaillot proper, and that includes the Musée de l'Homme. And we moved on to the next level, meaning now we have very tangible actions that we have started rolling out. Of course, our 4 establishments are very close to one another, geographically speaking, and that means that it's easier for us to work together to pool problems and resources, because we really share the same site.
Okay, thank you so much, Aurélie. Yes, so you're close to each other geographically, but now let's move over toward the Olivier. who works at the VILLETTE site, and you are very much concentrated on relations in the immediate neighborhood. Yes, I'm head of an association established in 1946. And so it's within the 56-hectare site of the Villette, 400,000 visitors a year. And we work with various institutions present on the site, and we work with theaters. There are venues in the association as well. So it's a really multicultural site that goes from there's music, museums, and many types of sites and venues and activities. So for us, it is important to include people in the local neighborhood in the life of the site, which has very multiple usages. There's also a park within the site. Not everyone comes for the museum or cultural venues, but also we wanted to insist on our social responsibility to the neighborhood. So this is something that's going to shape a lot of our actions. There's educational initiatives. We have created social enterprises, and employment agency helps to integrate people into various jobs on the site, and we also work with enterprises beyond our site. We are also working on the ecological transition starting about 4 or 5 years ago. Now, each of the institutions present on the site has their own initiatives, but the idea is to pool our efforts, and the association helps coordinate these efforts. So we are in charge of this coordination, and working with the city of Paris, we also lead some broader actions. So the idea is, how can we work with the people in the neighborhood and really achieve some synergies with other institutions in the local area? Okay, so now let's go to the north of France. Olivier Sergent from the city of Lille. So here again, your work is not just on the actions, cultural actions, but broader than that. And so you put together a network of some 45 towns, and led by the mayor, Martine Aubry. Well, yes, I'm in charge of the Sustainable Culture Department for the city of Lille. And it was created in October 2021. And we hosted the Euro Forum event in September 2022. So it's true, it's a new mission. In fact, a lot of work had been done by the city on the subject of sustainable development, signing of the Agenda 2021, and the cultural agenda as well. And so the city has been very proactive with its own climate plans and various initiatives. And so we began to feel the need to also work on these topics from within the cultural department. And so it is up to us to help to contribute to the various efforts across the city, but keeping in mind, of course, the inclusion and the social aspects of culture. So we have to work on all of these different levels. It's true that the Year of the Culture Capital was hugely important to us, and a call to action was launched by the mayor, Mrs. Aubry. There we had 150 towns participating. And the Eurocities network has 155 cities across 30 countries. And it's mostly about sharing good practices and doing lobbying at the European level. And we set out 16 priorities, but in fact they're still being developed, and we have new members, 24 new members, and we hope it will be signed in June in Brussels at a forum, not the culture forum, but rather an environment and health forum. So we want to make that tie in. Okay, so these are quite different examples that we're hearing about from our speakers. Now, between a national museum, a city, a collection of festivals. So, as Olivier, as an Olivier Flamand, as an association, what is your relationship with these public institutions? What is your contribution or your added value on sustainable development? Well, first of all, our added value is to get the institutions involved and working together. It's a very ambitious project at the Villette, which is aiming for zero waste. I don't know if we'll make it entirely, because normally we produce several 100,000 tons of waste per year by the establishments themselves and our visitors. So we began a materials flow analysis across all of the establishments to fully understand these flows. And what we can see is, well, this very mixed approach and different resources. So the City of Sciences is working very hard on the topic. It's true. We've got 3,500 staff on the site, and only two full-time workers are devoted to the question of waste management. It's not enough. But, well, there's questions of, allocating budgets, but for us it's not enough. And often the budget will go to the technical departments. But we believe that it needs to be at a higher level in the organization. So we want to put in place very operational initiatives. Let me give you some simple examples, but they're not easy to do. So on our operations, we want to extend the service life of various objects and equipment. So be able to do that from an exhibit, well, you have to take stock of that very carefully. We have to do very detailed inventories, and and sometimes it's not done thoroughly enough. So what we do is we have trained some people. We are working with a software publisher, and so, for example, projectors can be reused, rather than buying new ones, or we should be donating them to other associations, for example. But, all of this requires careful management. Another example is what we've done with the Pompidou Center. There, they had 200 computers that were, set off in a kind of that they were just sitting there unused. But the problem was to be able to donate them. Well, the hard disks needed to be reformatted. So here again, we trained job seekers to do this. We created a partnership again, and then we were able to donate the computers to other associations. Then at the Zenith venue, we wanted to eliminate single-use plastics. So we put together a system for cleaning of reusable plastics. So for us, local employment is really important to employ people in our district. And so for the and now we have, our eco cups, things that, people don't take home with them. We can clean them and reuse them. So all of this has to be very operational as far as we're concerned. Another thing that we are doing, which won't have an immediate impact, but we're starting with some working groups. So this allows us to begin working on topics like a circular economy within our district, be it in construction or wood or cultural goods. There's a lot of constraints here, be they practical or legal or other. But what our associate can do is to help bring these people together around the table to work on solutions. So the pooling of efforts and resources at the Arts Hill, as you call it, there's some museums and theaters that aren't perhaps used to working together. So what have you learned about that, given such a great variety of institutions? Aurélie? Well, we have common issues, in fact, even though we're not all doing performing arts. But if we look at, there's the theater and then there's the museum, not doing the same thing. But we were able to come up with some very simple things that we could do together. So, for example, we now organize small events in the atrium. And what we did was signed an agreement with the theater so that we can use their chairs, so that we don't have to buy or store these chairs. Now, this might sound like nothing at all, but in fact, it was something that simply wasn't done at all before. So this involves several things. First of all, we have to speak to each other regularly. There has to be a dialogue and cooperation. And it does take human resources to manage that. You have to plan ahead. And then there has to be a legal framework as well. How do we go about this? Well, it's not that easy because these institutions are quite separate. They are large. They can be rigid in their administration. So it's not always easy to set up even such a simple loan of chairs. But it takes some people who are handling that, and it can be done. And I think it works best once you allow yourself the time to put things in place. So through regular dialogue amongst colleagues, counterparts in other museums, we understand another's needs. And once we understand those needs, then we can begin to look for shared solutions. But first of all, yes, there has to be good, a relationship has to be built. And so that's what's important, is to break down the walls between institutions. And it's quite recent, in fact, and now we are beginning to work well together. So what we're seeing is that it generally has to be led by someone who is really devoted to the idea of cooperation. But it's something that has to be managed on a day-to-day basis, and it takes institutional support, not only from the institutions, but also from the ministries to whom we report. And there's a certain resources required. And when you're looking for greener solutions, sometimes this can require more funding. And for now, well, it's still fairly complicated. Okay, well, we'll be talking about budgets in a few minutes. So, Olivier, you were telling me the other day that you felt that, culture is nothing on its own, and that it takes time to develop cooperation. So tell us what's going on in Lille. You were able to help find solutions, bringing together a great disparity, great variety of participants. Well, yes, we work at different scales and on different time scales as well. Unlike Paris, we already worked quite well together ever since 2004 with our major event in the city. And so we often loan each other equipment, so that works easier at our level. But in terms of the ecological transition, this is a more recent issue. And so earlier, I was talking about getting everyone involved. Okay, it's we've got a lot of different players in the cultural field in Lille at all different levels, and some are more advanced than others in the ecological transition. So it's interesting to share practices and to help each other. Now, if we look at the Fine Arts Museum, the largest museum of Lille, is quite advanced on the topic, and particularly eco-design of their exhibits. And just a week from now, there's going to be a 2-day master class, or workshop rather, on the question of consumption in the museum. And so other departments are beginning to get involved. So the idea is really to circulate the knowledge, to share it, to talk to each other. So in the culture departments, we have our own action plans, and that we're really starting to implement. Now, our work with culture professionals, currently we're taking stock of the existing situation. We have to set a baseline to see what is the current state of play before we can work to improve it. And the idea is to get them involved in finding shared solutions. And there's another way of working together, but which can be quite complex, is, the work with artists and the institutions. It's true that there's a whole lot involved in this. There's the mobility of the people coming to the exhibits, the work with the artists, the representations on our website. And so it means that we also have to work with even the technical services of the city. And so we're really learning as we go. So for us, in culture, we are quite dependent on a lot of other departments as well. We can't do things on our own, that's for sure. So this is why, yes, pooling of efforts is particularly important. So, Rudy, when we talk about circular economy, sustainable development, combined tickets, but sometimes there's certain obstacles, be they, legal, for example, public contracts or data protection laws. Can a collective such as yours, can you tell us what are some of the lessons you have learned about overcoming some of these obstacles or getting the authorities to help you overcome them? Well, yes, we do lobbying, and it's and not just on sustainable development, but we have an issue, for example, around there were issues around the security services, where it was a bit of a legal battle there. But it's true that we want to touch on a lot of topics, including powder supply, mobility of visitors, waste management from the festivals. And so what we do is we work with individual festivals where we are working with them hand in hand in their preparation, but also during the festival and the dismounting of the festival. So the first thing is to understand what their issues are, to understand their context, so that we can then make proposals to help them improve their sustainable development strategy. So we try to work with them on all of those different topics. And our association is regional, and the festivals we work with are primarily centered in Brittany. So the idea is to create a real network of festivals, and it means we organize gatherings, discussion forums, and so they talk to each other now, and they can also agree to share equipment and resources. So what I've really noted is the thing that works the best to drive a festival to sustainable development is to get them to talk to another festival that is doing something about it already. And so it gives them new ideas as well. And we also organize workshops. And we get festivals to come in and talk about what they've been doing, and they learn from each other. And so it means that festivals who haven't yet started on this path can learn a lot and see what fits in with their possibilities. Okay, so that's at the regional level. Then we also work at other levels, for example, across a specific sector or multi-sector on a national level. So, for example, there's a national level project that we're organizing. It's the R2D2 of regional associations of festivals, so others like us, in fact, who are working on sustainable festivals. And so the work there was to try to create a French version of a British initiative called Drastic on Plastic, with the aim of absolutely eliminating single-use plastics from festivals. So we are trying to transpose it to France and develop it all across the country, working with our regional partners. And so what we've been able to do is bring together some 100 festivals who will be working together for 3 years on that specific topic of trying to eliminate single-use plastics. And so it's great to work at that level. So we can do theme webinars, for example, where we were hearing from a wide variety of types of festivals who talked about the plastics. So, for example, how do you get water to the public without using plastic bottles? What about the technical disposables and consumables used by the technical teams? So it was very interesting to try to roll this out at a national level and to learn from each other. And I think that is what is so interesting about such a network. Okay, so you've talked about ramping up the scale, going from the local up to the regional and maybe even national, and why not the international level? So you're talking about networks that are rather informal. You're not reporting to a ministry. So it's really rather informal. And so the initiative starts quite locally, in fact, it seems. Okay, so you talked about the dialogue. Aurélie, How does that work for you? Do you have meetings to get feedback? Is it easier now to approach these topics, to discuss the difficulties or even some failures? I mean, it's not always easy. People fear being judged. Do these networks on the topic of sustainable development, and when we're talking about experimentation, do people discuss freely about that? Well, yes, because we are all seeking our way. It's trial and error for all of us. And so the feedback is very important. And there's a lot of positive things that come out of it. But, you know, if something doesn't work, it's also very important to tell our counterparts so that they don't make the same mistakes we might have made. And so, you know, and it's also good to hear from colleagues who say, oh, yes, that worked really well for us, and others who will say, well, that didn't work for us, and here is why. Maybe it'll work for you, okay? So for us, yes, we have a very open discussion, and we do have meetings. We meet regularly. Okay, for us at on our hill where we are, you know, it's every 2 or 3 months we'll have the meeting. But some of the but for others, we speak every week, but on a variety of topics. Those of us who are in pretty much the same building. So there's an ongoing discussion, and we don't have to wait for a meeting to talk about certain topics. And within the Musée de l'Homme, we do discuss this subject. And here we meet monthly. And then what we do is we organize specific working groups with the most appropriate people on the operational side, as well as the strategic side, to see how we can make things work. So it depends on the topic. We'll put together a group, and they meet regularly as well. All of this takes time. It's true, though people are already quite busy with the rest of their work. So it means that our teams have to have the ability to set aside the time for this. It's not always easy to do, and so we have to mention this. You know, it doesn't just work on its own. It requires work. So everyone, you know, there has to be a collective awareness, also by, you know, from the Ministry of Culture, for example, to understand why we're devoting time to this. It's very important, and so this is the only way that we can manage to implement some of the actions that we decide on, but it does require devoting time to it.
Before we take questions from the audience, I would like to give each of our panelists the floor once again, just to conclude on those issues. I would like to know what are the 2 main challenges that you identify within your different networks. For the middle term, what are the biggest challenges? And I include there the question of funding. Do you think that when it comes to finding the necessary money, do you think that is sufficient right now to fulfill your objectives? Let's start with Olivier. On our level, I would say that it is implementing the action plan that is difficult right now. Of course, for our staff, it is perceived as an additional burden at the beginning. It's not that they don't want to do it, of course they do, but it's one more thing that they have to do. And there's a lot of reporting to do as well. There's always more reporting to do, always more red tape, and that's a burden for the staff. And I think that one of the main difficulties is just there, that we needed to be able to take everyone on board with us. And I think that everyone within our networks agree with the fact that the ideas usually come bottom up. They come really from the ground, and everyone has a lot of things that they're already doing. And then what is difficult is actually taking all those ideas and sharing them and reusing them together. Then you ask the question of money. Of course, there are things that are very expensive, and we're in the middle of an energy crisis, and we know that it's only going to get worse. I think that there's always this problem of finding money in the right place. And of course, some of our funders will say, but you do have the money, we gave you money, yes, but it can't be stretched indefinitely to add more things. Now, I would agree with the idea that exchanging best practices is probably one of our best bets. It's an excellent avenue to make headway there. At a local level, we have about 50 measures that have been assessed and vetted. And then you have each directorate rolling out some of those missions. In our department, we are not leading the actions directly. And then at the European level, it is still a work in progress. Olivier, what about you? What would you say are the two main challenges, and what about funding? I don't want to be, turning that into a caricature, but I would say that the emergency is the first challenge. And you know that for some resources, they are already almost entirely used up to 90% used up. So we need to change completely our paradigm. We need to eliminate this. This is not a paper cup. This is lined with plastic. So we need to do away with all of that, the plastic that is everywhere. And you have to think about that in cultural establishments as well. The production that we have in those cultural sites, this is also carbon intensive. So that would be the first part of my answer. And right now, you see, I'm fighting for about eco-cups, because eco-cups are a good thing, but everyone wants to have their own eco-cups. They want to customize it with their own logo so that you end up with 10 of them. So what's the point? Instead, having just one that is shared between all establishments, that would be useful. So we really need to change completely our approach of things, massively. Second challenge, that's a social challenge. You cannot have a transition if you don't work locally. You can create jobs, you can create social growth locally. Of course, there's always this word of degrowth that is being bandied about. The idea that degrowth is a problem because everyone is going to lose out and lose quality of life and lose years of life as well. But that's not true, because you can have a degrowth from the economic side that would be a social growth at the same time. But you need to invest in that. And investing massively in those issues is going to be a way to make more money at the end of the line. There are so many things that we can leverage. I try to pool energy resources, for example, between different establishments. I'm not going to give you the technical details. But 6 months ago, everyone was telling me that's impossible, there's absolutely no point. And now that costs are exploding, suddenly everyone's interested, because, yes, we can pool resources and we can save energy in so doing. So, yes, massively investing, shifting the paradigm. That's an investment in our future, and at the end of the day, that's also making more gains for establishments. Thank you very much. Aurélie, you were also talking about funding. It can be difficult to have this argument that you need more money to shift the paradigm. Yes, absolutely. And we know that if we want to be more efficient, well, we need to change things. Our buildings are often not the most modern or the most optimized from an energy point of view. If we want to make progress, then we need to renovate over the long term. And when it comes to the state's real estate, they will have to be a massive effort to renovate. But it takes time and it's very costly. However, like I said, this is a long-term investment. It's worth it. Now, at a different scale, or if you will, at the events level, in our jobs, in our institutions, we need to think about how we can improve things at that very simple level of small events. It's usually a lot less expensive. It's easier to do on a much smaller scale. And today we are able, for example, to reuse 70 to 80% of the objects that we use in our scenographies. So we can reuse. It's less expensive, but it still requires a certain level of investment. The thing is, it should not be just optional anymore. It should be obvious that we have to do it and do it all the time. That's where we should be headed. And quite often we hear that environmental economy goes hand in hand with a financial economy, and that you can make gains, but it's not always true, at least not at the very beginning. So we need to be clear on the fact that you have to invest first before you make gains. What about you? Would you like to conclude? Rudy? Yes, for us, it's taking things at scale that's going to be the problem. There are some festivals that already pioneered a lot of things like saving resources and working locally, etc. And now the question is, how do we make that the new standard? How do we make sure that those practices are now used everywhere and all the time? It has to be a collective movement. Everyone has to participate in that movement. The audience, the artists, the organizations. We really need to remain ambitious on those very urgent topics like climate change, but not just. Thank you, Rudy. And now let's take some questions from the audience. If we have some. Do you have any questions for our speakers? Good afternoon. Thank you. My question is for the Collectif des Festivals. The Aix-en-Provence Festival described things that could be done in sustainable development, and I would like to know whether you work with them. Do you draw inspiration from their work, or does your work inspire others? Indirectly, yes, we work with them because they're part of the COFIS, the grouping of committed festivals in the PACA region. And their coordinator worked in Aix previously and did their carbon balance study. So we work with COFIS, not with Aix directly. But I told you that we have a national network of regional structures, and this is a good example of how local initiatives can indeed inspire bigger things on a national level through collaborations that we have across networks. Any other questions? No, apparently not. All right, then. Thank you very much. And many thanks to our 4 speakers for being with us today. It was lovely listening to your very inspiring words. I wish you all the best in raising awareness for sustainable development and in developing your networks.